So after that first band I started another band called Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy. And we made this record. We had this kind of like minor league hit song over in Europe. It was called Television, the Drug of the Nation. And the song got used by U2 to open their Zoo TV tour. So they broadcast our video. It was a huge system in every stadium they played to start their show. And so they invited us to come on tour with them. And the first week that I was out on tour with them, I was kind of a fan of their music. I kind of knew their hits and whatnot, but I wasn't like a fan. And so after the first week, Bono comes up to me and goes, "Hey, Michael." It's my Irish accent. "Hey, Michael." Yeah, he goes, "You know my guitar player?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "His name is The Edge, not Ed." And the whole first week I've been like, "Yo, Ed, what's up, man? I like that hat, Ed, yo. I like that guitar, you got the Ed, yeah." Apparently it had been enough that The Edge had told Bono, like, "You better straighten this guy out. He's messing with my flow, man. She is down." So we got to know them on the tour, and at the time, it was like in the early '90s, and hip hop was just really starting to get going really strong in America. And they used to like to go to hip hop clubs. You take them out because nobody would recognize them in the hip hop clubs. So they had grown so big that they felt like awkward about it. They'd gone from being like sort of a medium-sized band to suddenly being like this huge band. So one day Bono invited us to fly in their jet to the next town, so we didn't have to drive in a little crusty van. And while we were on the plane, he was telling me the story about how after Joshua Tree had blown up and become this huge album, that he wanted to like get back to his roots, go back to like, the salt of the earth and do something to serve the greater good. And so he went to Ethiopia and he worked in this village. And him and his wife went there. The first day that he was there, he started digging this ditch. He was out toiling in the hot sun, and got all sunburned. His hands were blistered and his arms were feeling weak. At the end of the night, he laid down and flopped out in this hut, and he was just feeling like, man, I feel so good. Like I've made this contribution, I'm not just this poncy rock star, and I feel really good. And so there was a knock on the hut, and they said, "Mr. Bono, the chief would like to have an audience with you." And he smiled even bigger. He's like, "Wow, man, I'm living this, And so he went to meet the chief, and he sat down, and the chief said to him, "Bono, I really appreciate you coming here. Thank you so much." He said, "But even here in Ethiopia, in this little village, we know about you too. And today, we all sat by and watched as you helped to dig this well and fumbled with the shovel. You've set us back 3 days in our work. But we know you're a songwriter, and in our community, a songwriter is held the highest esteem because you tell the stories of our community and you pass them on. So what we want you to do is write stories." So him and his wife wrote one story that was like, one song was like called "Always Boil Your Water" because we're having problems with the water and disease and stuff. There was another song that was called "Always Use a Condom." Self-explanatory. And then there was another song called "Don't Put Cow Dung on the Baby's Umbilical Cord."
What?
Sounds like an off-topic, but
Wow.
there was a practice that they did to put cow dung on the baby's umbilical cord when he was born. But now that they were having problems with the water and different viruses were now in the water, they couldn't do this anymore without causing infection. So they taught these kids in the village a song. They made up little dances, and then the songs became part of the song and oral history of this village. And the reason that he said this to me was he said, "Michael, I just want to point out to you that music doesn't always have to be political in a large capital P sense of politics. It can be about inspiring other people. It can be just singing a song that makes somebody, it doesn't change the world overnight, but it helps people make it through a difficult night. So that's what I've always tried to do, is write songs like that. A few years ago, thank you. A few years ago, I went to Iraq in 2004, and I had been watching the news and hearing about the initial bombing of Iraq, which they were calling Operation Shock and Awe. I listened to this general on TV, and he was saying, we want to hit them with so much firepower that they are shocked and awed to the point where they're going to surrender. And I thought to myself, wow, man, I have 2 kids. What if somebody came to San Francisco and tried to shock and awe me? Like, how much explosive power would it take for me to quit, to not even think it would be worth fighting back, protecting my home, protecting my family, but to just give up? I thought, what would it be like to be waiting that night and putting my kids to sleep and trying to explain to them that we're going to be bombed tonight. There's going to be these explosions. Well, I just couldn't even imagine what to say. So 11 months after the war started, I went to Iraq and I played music on the street for people. And I visited their homes. I went into their basements where they hid during the bombings. And one family told me that they put everybody in the basement the first night of the bombing, and there were some windows on the sides of the basement. They put the kids in the center of the floor, and they put a blanket over the kids. And I thought, oh gosh, what is a blanket going to do if a bomb hits you? Or even if you hear the noise of a bomb, it's not going to be stopped by a blanket. What is a blanket? And they explained to me that when a bomb would go off even 3 or 4 blocks away, that all the glass would shatter, and the glass would come flying in and hit people, and that's why they all got under the blankets. So just hearing these details, I was so moved, you know. And then at night I would go and I'd sit and I'd play with U.S. soldiers, and I'd talk to young men and women who were like, you know, your age, my age, people who had been in the first Iraq War and were going there for a second time around, who were there under the assumption that they were going to get Saddam because he was involved in 9/11 and that they had weapons of mass destruction. And now that they found that these things weren't true, and so what were they doing there? But at the same time, as I found all this like confusion, pain, war, I found that music was an opener, and that wherever I'd go, situations would be really intense, and I'd start to play my guitar and I'd start to sing, and people would laugh, and they'd dance, and they'd sing along and they'd clap their hands. And it didn't matter if they were Iraqi civilians or U.S. soldiers, and even at times I would bring both groups together and we would all hang out and play songs together. And it really restored my belief in the power of music as a healing force in the world. But at the same time, it also restored my belief that everybody has an opportunity to do something here in this life, you know, to serve the greater good. And I guess if I had any message to you, it would be to be the best you can be, you know, and that means to be yourself in whatever situation you're in. Be yourself, be your authentic self. And work to improve yourself all the time. Never give up trying to improve yourself, trying to learn something new. And then the second thing is to serve the greater good. And earlier my girlfriend, she texted me, she's like, what are you going to talk about today? And I go, well, to be your best and to serve the greater good. And I wrote to her on my iPhone, and it auto-corrected, and she's like, what is this about serving the greater food? Well, you know, that works too. Right? But to serve the greater good, serve something that's greater than yourself. You know? And there was a time when I first started in music that I had, living in California, all the money from schools was being cut from our school districts in California. And more money was being put into the prison system, more and more. It was almost like a direct proportion. If they took out 12 million from the schools, they put 12 million more in the prisons. And so I wrote a song about it called Crime to Be Broken in America. And I was out performing this song. One day somebody said to me, Michael, have you ever performed in a prison? I was like, no, as a matter of fact, I haven't. And here I was singing this angry song about this issue, but I'd never gone into a prison to perform. So he invited me to come in, and I went in and performed. I started singing this song, and I looked around the room, and there was all these prisoners looking at me like, we don't want to hear angry songs about the prison system. We want to hear songs about how much we miss our girlfriend, about how much we would love to dance, how much we would love to party, all the simple things in life. And I realized that music works in different ways. And so does politics, and so does our effect on the world. A lot of times we expect that the president is going to change things. The president's going to give us more jobs. The president's going to help the economy. All these things that we have these expectations for. But during those other 461 or so days between those elections, we have an opportunity every day to try to make the world a better place. There was a woman in Denver who came up to me, and she'd seen my film, I Know I'm Not Alone, which is about my time in Iraq. And she said, Michael, I saw your film. I'm so moved. I wanted to do something to help change the world, but I just couldn't think I don't play guitar. I'm not a politician. I didn't know what to do. And I said, what are you doing? She goes, I'm a hairdresser. And one day a woman came into her salon who was undergoing chemotherapy. She sat the woman in her hair, and she started asking her what she wanted to do with her hair. And when she did it, the woman's hair started falling out in clumps in her hand. And the woman started to cry. And she looked in the mirror and saw her hair going away. And so they sat there, and she listened to this woman's story about how she had first discovered she had cancer, how she had gone to chemotherapy, and how eventually her hair was starting to fall out. And then she heard this woman's story. She started to shave all her hair off. And at the end of it, the woman looked in the mirror, and with tears coming down her face, she broke into this smile, and she said, I look a lot cooler without hair. And they decided, the two of them, that they were going to start a night, one day a week, where they would cut and do the beauty needs of any person who was undergoing chemotherapy. And to this day, they still do that night every week at her salon. The point of all this is like a lot of us feel like, what can we do? I only have a certain set of skills, or I'm not sure how I can apply what I do to the world. But it doesn't matter if you're a bookkeeper or a beekeeper. There's something that you can do to give back. And so be yourself, serve the greater good. And the last thing is to rock out. Rock out wherever you are. What I mean by that, it sounds kind of goofy, but it's actually not. It's really means to just appreciate life.
Yeah.
To be frivolous when you need to shake things off. To be able to laugh when things get difficult. My grandmother, Grandma Brown, she was on my birth father's side. I searched 2 years and I found my birth parents. Met my grandmother on my father's side. And she had been given up at birth by her grandmother. Because, not by her brother, by her mother, and had been raised by her grandmother. Her mother had left her on a doorstep of a doctor in the community, and her grandmother took her and raised her. And her grandmother had been a slave until the time that she was 12 years old. So she had grown up with this experience, and my grandmother worked cleaning people's homes her whole life. Basically until she was into her 90s, she did. And so one day I'm on tour and I get this call, Michael, you need to come down to the hospital. Grandma's in the hospital. We don't know how long she has to live. So I go rush to the hospital. I go in the hospital. Her eyes are closed. She's on a heart meter, it's slowly beeping. And, you know, I'm like so scared. You know, I'd become very close to her in just a very short time. And you know, I pick up her hand, I give her a kiss on the forehead, and she slowly opens her eyes. And she starts talking. She didn't have her teeth in. I said, Grandma, why are you in the hospital? Because I'm pregnant. And 96 years old. Why do you think I'm in the hospital? I said, Grandma, who got you pregnant? Reverend Mitchell. So my grandma always had this ability to laugh whenever things got really difficult, you know, and to sing and to dance and to celebrate life as much as celebrate as hard as she worked, you know, and that is what it means to rock out wherever you are. So be yourself, serve the greater good, and rock out. Song I wrote for my son, and when he turned 21, he hopped in a Greyhound bus and he decided to drive across the country all the way to New York. And the day that he was leaving, I was really caught off guard because I was that same age when I had him, and I remember my life being very different than his. And so I wrote him this song. Another morning is coming, the sun is high, but I know that today is the day that I might cry, because I know you're going, and I know you're leaving to somewhere. Hope to find the peace of mind you're seeking in the back of a Greyhound bus that'll take you far. In the back of a Greyhound bus you can be who you are. And I say, la 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 la. I got love for you, love for you. And we say, la 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 la. I got love for you, love for you. We say, la 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 la. I got love for you, love for you. So I'll be waiting, my dear, waiting right here. I'll be waiting, my dear, waiting right here. I'll be waiting, my dear, waiting right here for you. Put your hands together, y'all. I remember the time back when we were small, in and out, up and down with the south for the crazy road. It's been a long time now, I should have said what I tell you now. But I got faith in you, and I believe in you. So I say, in the dark of the night, in the hotel room alone, in the middle of the city where nobody cares to know, in the grand ballroom of Weber State University, you just shine on down, and we say, la 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 la. I got love for you, love for you. And we say, la 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 la. I got love for you. Hey, what I you, love for you. We say la 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 la. I got love for you. Make some noise. In the back of a Greyhound bus, it will take you far. In the back of a Greyhound bus, you can be who you are. You say, la 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 la. That means I got love for you.